This episode of the Better Every Shift podcast is brought to you by Lexipol, the experts in policy, training, wellness support, and grants assistance for first responders and government leaders. To learn more, visit lexipol.com. That's LEXIPOL.com. Now let's get into the show.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Better Every Shift podcast. My name is Aaron Zamzow. With me, as always, is Janelle Fusquette. How are you, Janelle? Janelle, by the way, is the editor-in-chief of Fire Rescue One. I am also, I'm a firefighter. I'm a writer for Fire Rescue One. And Janelle, did you know, someone told me I was the voice of the fire service now that we've done this 41 times. I don't know if can really own that one or not, but it sounds really cool.
Oh yeah, I think we need to add it to your bio immediately, and I need to send some sort of chalice or, prize.
Some prize. Maybe I'll put a patch on that says that with a little microphone or something on it. But
Yeah.
It's been a fun journey, and it's one that we're not going to stop, drop, and roll today on, because we have with us Andrea Vastis, who is with the NFPA. We're going to talk about fire prevention and dig really into the messages that that NFPA is trying to convey. So welcome, Andrea. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. This is great. Really appreciate it.
Now you're calling from a campus somewhere, a college campus?
I'm actually at the Alabama Fire College in Tuscaloosa, Alabama today, because we're here doing some trainings with fire and life safety educators. And so this is great. And what a better place to be, really, than where it really happens and where our fire service get trained.
It sets the mood for the podcast, that's for darn sure. Let me just read a little bit. You are the Senior Director for Public Education with the National Fire Protection Association. Again, we're going to talk about fire prevention. We were talking a little bit behind the scenes. What's your background, and how did you get to where you are today here with us?
Yeah, thanks. As I don't have a fire service background, my background actually is health education and public health. So I actually cut my teeth as a worksite wellness educator. I used to go into companies and teach things like back injury prevention and smoking cessation programs, and then worked with the Department of Health, government health prevention programs, things like chronic disease prevention, cardiovascular disease, but really ways in which we can engage with communities. And these were the places where I learned very boots on the ground about behavior change and different kinds of people and the different challenges that people face every day, right? People wanting to do the right things for themselves and their families. But there are a variety of reasons why people can't always engage in the safety and health behaviors we want them to. I've done some teaching. I was actually at CVS Health before I came to NFPA, working with pharmacists and really helping with their expanding their scope of healthcare. And then 5 years ago, I came to NFPA, to this really wonderful group of people in public education and wildfire, just dedicated to being able to shore up the resources of residents and of the people who are doing the work with the residents.
What's the biggest surprise going from kind of the outside, we call it from the outside, and then coming to the fire service? Just off the top of your head, what's the biggest thing you're kind of like, oh my gosh, this is a little different here?
Yeah. The true camaraderie, the true care that the colleagues have for each other, right? You work in basic places and colleagues get along and they care about each other. They care about their work. But working with the fire service, man, they're in it because they care about their community, and boy, do they take care of each other and have such a commitment, not only to their community, but to each other. And I think that is just tremendous.
Yeah, we do a great job. I would totally say that we react really well. Now we're working on being more proactive with our support, and especially on health and wellness. And and speaking of proactive, that's what fire prevention is all about. So what's the main theme, top-down approach of 2023? What do we really want our firefighters to know?
Okay, so for Fire Prevention Week, right? 2023. The theme this year is Cooking Safety Starts With You. Pay attention to fire prevention. And we're at 101 years of Fire Prevention Week, which is pretty impressive. It's the oldest running continuous public health observance in the United States, celebrated all over North America. And many countries actually have a version of Fire Prevention Week that they might do in October or some other piece of it. But at the heart of it, it's really about taking something that's relevant, that's going on, that is affecting everybody in one way, shape, or form, and helping create some calls to action that can make a difference. And in this case, we have really dual audiences. We are going after the residents in the community, what they should know, and understand that fire really still is a big issue, and that fire safety is something that has to happen every day. And how do we help our fire service and our fire and life safety educators and our injury prevention people to equip them with ways they can continue to reach their communities?
So really, I mean, fire prevention, for a firefighter, we're like, hey, we have this idea. We don't want to, we like the fires in a way, like, right. Cause we're a little bit different. So fire prevention, sometimes you say that to a firefighter, they go, oh, it's that weak, but in all essence, we need to really embrace this because you're helping educate those citizens and our communities to help us really in the same breath, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I get it, because you go into the fire service because, man, you have that adrenaline rush, right? You want to run into that building. That's part of how you're wired, and we really get that. At the same time, man, wouldn't it be so nice if we didn't have to always have you do that and send you in there? And there are just too many times when it doesn't go as heroically as you had hoped.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to do a better job of making it on everybody's responsibility for fire prevention.
Yeah, and I think that even though, to Erin's point, yes, there's a certain aspect of the adrenaline rush and they love to fight fires, and catching a fire, that's a term of like excitement because they get to go do this thing that they've been trained to do. Of course, we get that. But at the same time, I don't think any firefighter wants to think about someone losing their home, being injured. Yeah. And when you put it in that terms, of course, and there's no suggestion that anyone is hoping for more fires in which people are injured or killed or anything like that.
Right.
But the sentiment there, I think we all totally understand, because it's not the quote unquote sexy part of the job, right? But there are still too many people who are experiencing these injuries and deaths. And I'm hoping, can you shed a little bit of light on why you picked cooking safety for this year's theme, and really what we'll get into later, really what the fire department can, how they can capitalize on that and what they can do. But yeah, tell us a little bit about the background.
Yeah. And you're right, because I think the changing nature of fire has made it so that there are a variety of things we have to do to keep up with it. And just the changing nature of what fire service are addressing in their communities, right? It's not a lot of other things that are going on. And there's a lot of interconnectedness of the risk factors, and the being part of a prevention process means you're connecting with your community in a whole different way. And you now become with your residents in it. And I think that's really exciting. But every year when we think about Fire Prevention Week, we're like, okay, one finishes and we start thinking about the next year's theme. We have a few criteria, right? So number one, it has to be data driven. We have to look at what's the data. Is something an emerging problem? Is something a continuing problem, a worsening problem, right? Is there something actionable we can give people to do? So we need to be able to say, okay, we're going to pick this topic and we're going to give them these 3 things that they can do that actually can reduce their risk. And it needs to be universal enough. So something that it touches across geography, age, demographic. And so maybe there's some disparities within it, but things that we can really do. And so, if I may, last year was our 100th anniversary. And we said, okay, 100 years later, what we know is that fire is faster, right? You used to have 11 at least minutes to get out safely from your home. You're down to about 2 minutes to safely get out of your home with today's home furnishings and the synthetics and open floor plans. And so that was part of why we said, fire won't wait, plan your escape. And so this year, as we're continuing to look, we're like, what continue to be issues? Well, even as the number of reported home fires go down, the proportion of cooking fire-related deaths has stayed the same in the last 40 years. And cooking fire has remained the number one cause of home fire and home fire injuries. And that kind of concept of unattended cooking remains a major cause of cooking fire deaths. So the data's there, and we're learning more about it, and we're seeing some changes in some of the deaths that have to do that are alcohol related. And so again, no matter where you cook, how you cook, if you're not the one cooking but someone's cooking for you, that's universal. It's actionable. There are things people can do to reduce their risk, and the data really supports that this is that we need to continue to address.
So what are the three major things that we wanted to really hit home this year with this message, as firefighters, and then also as members of the community too, right? We want to make sure that neighbors understand this, family members understand this message.
Yeah. I think there's the few key things is, so cooking safety starts with you is all about empowerment, right? It's saying, everybody has a responsibility and a wellness. The pay attention part is the part that's about the relevancy of today's world. So I work from home now, right? I travel, but I also work from home. That means a lot of times I've got my computer set up in my kitchen. I'm cooking while I'm working. There's people around, more remote work. My phone is dinging here. My work phone is dinging. My personal phone is dinging, right? We've got a lot of multitasking and distractions happening. And so, so much of it has to do with, okay, we need people to start kind of the focus. So it's things like making sure that your cooking area is safe. Couple of, key messages. So it's things like turning your pot handles inward. That's such a simple thing, but is such a critical thing, especially because we know that kids or pets can knock into things. Even you can, right? When you're not paying attention, it's easy to knock into something. It can cause a burn. It can cause a fire when grease or something spills out. And keeping a lid nearby. We know that at the very beginning of a fire, you can take that lid and slide it on a pan, turn off the burner, and you have extinguished that fire, because the majority of these are cooktop fires. And so that cooktop is that place that needs that area of making sure you're in the right spot, that lid. Then there is things like setting a timer and just staying nearby. I might be simmering something, or I'm heating something up, right? And we have this concept that something takes longer to heat up than we realize, or we don't realize how quickly that oil will ignite, will just auto ignite. And once it does, it gets big fast. And people, again, they don't understand the way fire works, and especially in like with grease or oil in a pan. So, message one, turn your handles, keep a lid. Message two, stay with your cooking, set a timer, right? You're simmering something, set a timer for every 15 minutes to remind you to check on it, keep you focused on that cooking. And three, which is very much about preventing burns, scalds, and fires, is keeping kids 3 feet away from where you're cooking and where you're serving hot foods or liquids. Kids under the age of 5 bear a really high burden of those scalds and contact burns that are seen in the emergency department. So there's no place for a kid 3 feet or 1 meter from where you're cooking or where you're serving those hot foods and liquids.
And you were saying, off camera a little bit that's we're getting a lot of more of the elderly that are getting burned from
Yeah.
either like not having like being in within that same kind of perimeter, correct?
Yeah, yeah. We talk about stop, drop, and roll, right? And it's not really a primary message for little kids. Little kids need to understand the sound of the smoke alarm first and foremost, and how to get out. They're not catching fire, right? They're not igniting to the extent that they used to, but older adults are, and some of it has to do with if they're wearing. They're cooking with in a bathrobe with longer sleeves on a range. They're not realizing their own space, right? And so actually 8% of the cooking fire deaths for older adults actually had to do with igniting their clothing, igniting.
Hmm.
So older adults do need to know how to stop, drop, and roll. And especially for older adults, thinking about, is your medication making you drowsy? Setting a timer. I think things like, oh, I'll just be a second. A package was delivered, right? We also like, all right, the packages are being delivered. I'm just going to run to the porch and get that. I can leave what's on the stove, turn off the stove because you know what's going to happen. You end up on your front porch and then you start talking to somebody or whatever. And all of a sudden that 30 seconds turns into 3 minutes and you've completely, bypassed the fact that you've got something on the stove.
Oh my gosh, how many times does that happen? It's like, there's no way I'm going to forget this. I'm actively making dinner. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
I can't possibly
Yeah.
forget. But then, like you said, you just like step into the other room, some other instant distraction from life. And
Yeah.
before you know it, I mean, how many times have I like heard, oh my gosh, my stuff is boiling over right now. Hustle back into the kitchen. I've now made a mess. Haven't
Yeah.
caught anything on fire yet, but you know, it's it happens so
Right.
fast.
It's
Like,
easy. And we're
so
all
distracted.
and that's it. And no one's doing this on purpose, right? That concept of unattended. And I think that that's unattended is a really major category of cooking fires, and of cooking fire deaths. Is it that people are like, well, I'm just going to leave this alone and walk away and I don't really care about it? Is it really that? Or is it that it's like, oh, I'm just going to go get something? Or, maybe somebody is cooking under the influence of some drugs, alcohol, or medication, where they're like, I'm just going to sit down for a minute and then they fall asleep. So, these are things that are very easy to happen. And that's why we're trying to get people to build in these habits
Yeah.
of just set that timer, keep that lid, stay in the kitchen, like put those things near you, and there's all the sub messages too, right? When you're cooking, have all your ingredients ready to go there so you don't have to go searching in the pantry while something is starting on the stove.
Yeah, cooking by Instagram sometimes is a little distracting. I think that we could probably add to it where you're,
Yeah.
make sure you got your recipes all set. But like even so, if you have a headset on, you got your cell phone there or whatever, there's cords that again, you look at, they can hook the pan handle. It's just there are more things in the kitchen. Kitchens are now the mainstay of a lot of
Yeah.
attention and entertainment. So there are distractions all around. You mentioned just being more present. Do you see that in not only in just in this fire prevention week, but like you've been here now 5 years. Are you seeing that as a common theme throughout the last couple of years more than ever?
I think what's happening is people are pulled in so many directions. So there's the I don't have time for this. There's the just people are multitasking. They're moving quickly. They're not realizing, right? They take their groceries, they're throwing things around, and maybe they're bumping into something and turning on the stove. But I think there's also just the piece where our headspace is full of so many things we have to remember to do, things that we think we're at risk for, right? And so we know that we're doing things like competing for space in people's heads for what they think that they should be focused on, right? My kids are worried about active shooter in their schools. People are worried about, heart disease, cancer, different things, and the intruder in the house, those kinds of things. And so
Yeah.
people don't always think about fire as that major threat to them. And so that's part of a shift in the sort of behavior of people. Is we're also fighting for a little bit of headspace there to be like, no, these are the reminders you need. Like this should be high on your list of things to prepare for when they're maybe thinking about, well, I'm already doing this and this for, making sure that I don't get mugged, and I make sure that I,
Yeah, so we don't think about that. Yeah, we don't think about fire as being a danger as much as it used to, because I think you hit it right on the head. We're competing with so many other kind of things these days. But unfortunately, the message still, based on even what we said last year, is fire's traveling faster, hotter.
yeah.
You have to react faster than and think about it and be more present with it. And I think
But
Janelle was
also,
gonna
I think,
add to that. Yeah.
yeah, no, I was just gonna say real quick, it's funny that we don't think about it as much of a risk when it's so much more likely that we're going to experience a cooking fire, just based on the fact that we do this all the time. Like we're cooking,
Right.
well, some of us don't cook as much as others, but you know, when people cook every single day, you know, there's a pretty high likelihood that something could happen there. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
whereas some of these other things we talked about, are much less likely to
Yeah.
occur in our lifetime. Um, but yeah, I think when we were talking about, competing for the messages, that's why it's so important to keep these messages simple, short and simple. And
Yes.
then do you imagine that when, something happens, like, the crew responds, puts out a fire, are they then taking those three messages and relaying them to the folks that had the emergency? Are you encouraging firefighters to share that message in the moment, or is it more beforehand, or both?
I think there's a lot of ways to do it, because that's kind of there's the message, there's the messenger, and then there's the context within it, right? So in the moment of an emergency, when something happens, you have that moment maybe to work with your media, because your media is the one reporting on that, to make sure that they have those top talking points to say, okay, fire broke out today and blah, blah, blah. And, your local fire department reminds residents to X, Y, Z. And that's a good way to do it. I'm also a big promoter of, okay, so when something goes wrong, you have that 30 seconds of people's attention to get those messages in there. How about when something goes right? We need to do a better job of, this thing happened, people got out, they knew what to do, they had a meeting place, they did all the right things, and that should be a story too. Because we need to do, it's not just the bad experiences, because a lot of people can easily go, well, that wouldn't happen to me. Well, they can find reasons why that's not them. But when something happens that worked well, you're giving people a like, oh yeah, like I can do that. And we want to reinforce it. And then it's about meeting people where they are, right? So that's why Fire Prevention Week, and people celebrate it all month long in October, that gives both a national campaign, an umbrella under which now you can really hit locally, because everyone's doing it across the board, right? We're really fortunate that our sister agencies, those agencies that with whom we work, obviously USFA, and other agencies, they're out there saying the same thing. And then it's going across local fire departments and state fire marshals. And that collectively gives a force, because people hear it in a variety of ways and they don't even realize that they're taking it in through social media, through an open house, through their schools.
Or even through, as you pointed out, an example of, hey, this is an example where cooking got a little out of control. They had the lid there because they were prepared. They were attentive. They threw the lid on. They were able to, call the fire department just in case. But when we got there, fire was out. We just helped ventilate. Everybody was safe. House was good to go back and we all learn a really great lesson on the value of being attentive and prepared
Yeah.
during cooking fires, right? Like, highlight those things.
Exactly. The successes have to be there because those saves are just as important, if not more important in that moment, because you're giving people something to do.
What's one thing that you would recommend for departments that are maybe struggling with getting the message out there? What do you think that we need to really kind of work on, just in general? Working with the public. You've been dealing with educating the public for many, many
Mhm.
years. What's one thing that we need to improve on as a whole in the fire service?
I think that it would be about not trying to, there's that term, don't boil the ocean. You can't boil the ocean. It's not about getting the buckshot approach of like, let me get every single message out and tell you every single thing. It's about looking at what are the most critical issues in your community and drilling into those, and then maybe doing fewer deeper. And it's okay to do fewer deeper, right? You're not going to solve everything. You're not going to prevent every fire. You're not going to prevent every heart attack, right? But if you can reduce that risk because you've touched upon the major pieces, right? If every single person cooked with a lid next to them and knew how to slide that lid on, we would see a big shift in the data, right?
Yep.
And so I think, resources are obviously an issue. And you may or may not have a full time fire and life safety educator. It's talk to each other about what you're doing because you don't have to all be doing something different. You can talk to your neighbor fire departments about what are you doing this week? Hey, maybe we can all do it. And it's focusing on a few key things that your data shows, your incident data, what's going on in a shift in your own community. I think those are important. And I do think it's important to use things that happen in a community as a foundational piece, and we can say, we won't want this to happen again, and here's how we can take it. But I think we need to be a little simpler and a little deeper than feeling like you have to squeeze it all in.
Yeah. I think that's one of the themes that comes up over and over again on the show is when people want to make change and feeling overwhelmed by not knowing where to begin. It's like decision paralysis. So I like your message here about focusing on what matters in your area, but also we don't need to reinvent the wheel here. Now, your team has done so much great work. There's
Yeah.
all these tools and resources available on your site. Fire Prevention Week is coming up in a matter of weeks. There's so much already out there that they can dial into. So can you tell us a little bit about the resources that exist on the NFPA website?
Yeah. And I think that's the thing, like I was saying, is I was so amazed to come on to this team and who are really passionate about this work and really care about the fire service, the educators, and the community. And so I get to be here and be like, and do the talking, but the work that happens in the background is really important. And we have colleagues who work on Fire Prevention Week. Our public education team is pretty small. Amy LeBeau, April Hart. It really is a full NFPA effort. So I say two names, and there's a lot of work that goes on to get a Fire Prevention Week up and running, right? But if you go to firepreventionweek.org, what we've done is put content for you that you can plug and play. And we've done a variety of it because we understand that there are different demographics. So for the fire and life safety educator for the fire department, go to the toolkit page. And as you're scrolling down that toolkit page, you will find community ideas with, ideas for trying different things out beyond the open house, right? Open houses are fine, but all different ways you can reach people. And then we have a variety of fillable resources. So we've templated event flyers and press releases and talking points that you can then localize and put into your community. And then as you continue to scroll down that page, we've created a variety of social media cards that are pre-formatted They're in English and Spanish, and we actually have them in French as well for our Canadian friends. And they cover a variety of types of cooking, so grilling, cooktop, baking, and a variety of ages. And that even includes one that's clubbing and cooking don't mix. So for college students, late night when you're coming home, do not cook, right? Or, after a night out, order in. So we've got a variety that you can use and plug into your social media. Again, depending on your demographics and what you're trying to do. We have logos that you can download so you can brand things. Fire Prevention Week. We actually have a variety of tip sheets, and these are actually one of our most utilized assets. We have a variety of tip sheets on a number of topics. And within cooking, we have cooking, grilling. We have a new one on electrical cooking appliances because people are using air fryers now and pressure cookers. And those you can download, plop your department logo on, and reproduce and put out there. And so on our toolkit page, that's the one. Just go through it. And then we have a whole activity section, lesson plans and coloring sheets and activities. And I will say it's all in the cooking theme. And within the activities, we always add smoke alarm messaging and home escape messaging. I call it the trifecta, right? Because those are the top three things that we always have to focus on: cooking, escape planning, and smoke and carbon monoxide alarms. That's the trifecta of the work that we do. And so when you're teaching about cooking, you're also always teaching about the importance of smoke alarms and having an escape plan, to go along with those messages.
So Andrea, I see the message. The Sparky is part of a lot of the messaging, which is great because obviously brings the kids in, and there he is right there. You have some clever sayings and slogans that really try to draw attention. What's your favorite?
Oh gosh. No, Sparky's the best. So, Sparky's our mascot. And, it's one of those things when we do it by the numbers. NFPA is about 127 years old. Fire Prevention Week's 101. Sparky's 72, right?
Sparky.
He's been around since 1951.
Is that in dog years or?
No, So imagine he's so, but Sparky's a cue to action. And I think that's the other piece of it. And so when we think about things that will trigger, right? And so using Sparky as he's friendly, he's wearing his turnout gear. He's an authority figure who's a friendly authority figure, and he's a cue to action. And so he is prominent in all themes. Sparky actually has his own website that's kid-oriented, sparky.org, which does not have any advertising, and there's nothing sketchy about it. It's all vetted, age-appropriate content because, if your kid's going to be on the computer doing stuff, have them learn about fire safety in a safe, not scary way where they can do it through games and activities. But he is really he's our mascot, and he's the guy. Everybody loves Sparky.
Everybody does love Sparky, and I didn't know he was 72 years old, which obviously that message and using him to promote the message works really, really well. Just to summarize this year, the biggest thing, with 2023, when I'm a firefighter going in and I'm conveying this message, you talked about the handle, you talked about having a cover, being attentive. Anything else? What's another little tip or a trick that I could use, or you could give me as a firefighter going into to speak with, the children about this message for 2023?
Well, and I think that's the question is saying is like, right, if you're talking to kids, your message is a little different, right? Your message is, stoves, ovens, air fryers. These are tools. They get really hot. For younger children, we actually have activities called Hot, Not Hot, right? And so it's the stay away from hot things, stay away from things that might be hot, sometimes are hot, right? And so it's really about recognizing sort of that space and being able to say, like, these are things you don't go near. These are things that for adults to use. Um, when we start talking with older kids who might be doing a little bit of cooking or microwaving, right? Now we're focused on how do you use the microwave safely? Um, Reminding the college students that water goes in the mac and cheese before you stick it in the microwave, which I keep hearing is one of those things that keeps happening over and over again. And so it's very much about the, paying attention. Don't be texting and cooking, ban the Snapchat, things like that. And so then it's really about who your audience is. With college students, we talk a lot about just being safe in the kitchen, not having a lot of stuff around. You're thinking you're going to like study and cook, keep your books away from it. And it's really just about, some of those setting the stage. And if you notice, we try to keep our things in a positive note, right? We try to remove the don'ts, right? Keep kids 3 feet away, as opposed to don't let kids near the stove. We try to, messages need to be posed because nobody wants to be told what not to do, because then they're going to do it. And it just doesn't sit right. So I think the other thing is that when you're on fpw.org, firepreventionweek.org, you can find all those sub messages. And then certainly we have our educational messaging desk reference, which is also linked into our toolkit page. So there's a whole chapter on cooking fire safety. It starts with the most important messages. Stay with your cooking, keep an eye on what you fry, setting a timer, making sure things are set. And then it will go on to things like, if you're grilling, where to place the grill, sticking with your grill. If you're using an appliance, keeping it away from kids and on a countertop away from kids, things like that. Even just cooking in the oven, right? It's easy to forget that there's something on the oven, and recognizing that, just once something's on the stove and it gets heated, it gets hot. And once that fire starts, it's being heated from the bottom and it's there. And so that is what keeps it going and makes it bigger.
And also I think with kids too, it's about, reminding parents of these things, right? And working as a team. Hey, there's something on the stove. As a kid, I got to remember, I need to make sure I stay clear and don't try to distract mommy or daddy too much, because there's something that's hot that's there.
Yeah. And, cooking can become very much a family affair. And so we actually have a kids in the kitchen activity, things that they can do in the kitchen so they can participate in the cooking process. It's not like we want to keep them, like that, oh no, cooking, you can't have anything to do with it. And so we actually have a kids in the kitchen activity and different kinds of things that we want them to be able to engage in. They can set the table, they can help prep some vegetables, they can do different kinds of things and be involved with it. But the actual, use of that range top and stove and oven has to be done by someone who's alert and able to do that.
So Andrea, this is great stuff. Really appreciate all the insight, especially for a firefighter like me. I think you gave us just enough. I got my head wrapped around the messages, but you're not done yet. We like to dig a little bit more in depth into, you and a little bit about your background. And we put you on what's called the hot seat. We just ask some personal off the wall, sometimes questions. They're either from our moms, who were our very first 2 listeners. Now we have more than that. So we get some feedback from listeners, and Janelle likes to prepare some of these just from her staff meetings, and other guests ask some of these questions as well. So I'm going to have Janelle ask the first question.
All right. So be honest. Have you ever caught your kitchen on fire?
I have not. I have had some close calls.
Any worth sharing that there might be?
It's so funny. Like 3 days before my first day at NFPA, I had put some water to boil, on the stove. And what did I do? I went upstairs to do something real quick, completely forgot. It boiled down, 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 down. I come downstairs and I'm like, "Ugh." And I'm like, oh my God, I haven't even started this job yet and I'm going to lose it because I'm going to catch my kitchen on fire. And that one moment was like, okay, like it was, and that I have to tell you, I set a timer all the time now. I set things in like 5-minute increments, 10-minute increments because I have the worst short-term memory. So, yeah.
Just a little secret. It happens at firehouses too. We get called and someone may forget to turn off the stove or the griddle. And so I know there's a lot of people kind of chuckling and pointing fingers right now if they're listening to this in a firehouse,
Mhm.
but I've known of a couple instances where as you are on a call, you get a tone or a page to your firehouse address. It's embarrassing, especially if you're the cook. But it happens to all of us. So, that's why we have fire departments. That's why we have NFPA. That's why we have fire prevention. So, working with the NFPA, you mentioned that it's a different type of work. What is an instance where you've really seen the positive effects of the work you're doing? A moment of pride, I guess we would say.
So a personal moment of pride was that my daughter, she just graduated college this year. And last year, her friends had an off campus apartment. And she called me and she's like, Mom, there's no smoke alarms in the bedrooms and the windows are painted shut. What should they do? And I was like, yes, that's my kid, right? And she's like, and I'm like, yeah, they have to call their landlord right now or they're calling the fire marshal on him. So that was a really nice personal moment of pride where she looked at it. She was in her friend's apartment and she noticed and she paid attention to that. So that was pretty awesome. A story that I tell now when I'm with educators is like how they don't realize the true effect that they have. Is I was in New Mexico working on a training and was told about an older woman who lived alone who called animal control. And she called them and said, I have a bird in my house. I have a bird in my house. I can't find it, but I have this bird in my house. Come help me. And the animal control showed up and it wasn't a bird. It was the chirp of the smoke alarm. And that animal control officer could have been like, you crazy lady, that's the smoke alarm, and just go get a new battery. But they didn't. They called the local fire department and helped get new smoke alarms put in for her and made sure she had all working smoke alarms. And to me, that is a source of pride that all fire and life safety educators should take, because this person knew it and cared enough about it and recognized that it was an important enough issue to help this older woman, and knew, oh, I should call my local fire department. They'll know what to do. So that to me shows that even if you don't always realize that you're having an impact, collectively, it's out there. It's making a difference.
Now, can you think of a time when you were in your daughter's position and you were somewhere and you were like, time out, folks. I see that, this rule is being broken. You need this detector, something like that. Do you kind of see everything now through the lens of fire prevention?
I do a little bit. Yeah. Like if I was at somebody's house and they were cooking and the handles were out and I just casually walked over and tripped it. I was like, and things like that. I notice. And so I have become a little bit of that person. I try to do it. I try to remember to do it in the way that you're supposed to do it, which is, hey, I noticed this thing. Oh, but yeah, I definitely tend to see a lot more of that. And even just, my parents' smoke alarm, the chirp happened and they called me. They're like, oh, we need a new battery. So my husband and I came over and it was old. So we needed a whole new unit because it was over 10 years old. And so, of course, I put it on and I test it. And my mom's like, oh, that's what it sounds like. And I'm like, oh my God, I've been doing this for 5 years and I've never like with you said, hey, by the way, this is the sound of it. So yeah.
So you mentioned you've kind of gotten this different lens to look through things. What's another thing that you're doing to be better? Hence, better every shift, or for you, better every season, or better every safety week.
Yeah, is bringing that. I mean, I think, but I'm trying to be better personally with it so that I bring it forth in the way that we should be doing it with our community members. The hardest thing to do sometimes is with your family members, because you jump right in and you're like, oh, you need to be doing blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, you wouldn't do that as an educator. You wouldn't go in and tell people what to do because nobody wants to be told what to do. And so I'm trying to be better, like with my own, if I see something to do it in the way that I would do it as an educator, and say, oh, I noticed this thing. Would it be okay if I asked you more about it, or said a couple things about it, and do it? I think it's that. And then I think the other thing professionally is who's being left out of this conversation, who's being left out of the messaging, right? A couple of years ago when we were doing Learn the Sounds of Fire Safety, and we were talking about, we wanted to make sure that we were focused on people who are deaf and hard of hearing, right? Who's being left out of getting access to things like smoke alarms and the types of smoke alarms they need. When we talk about escape planning, people with disabilities, older adults. When we talk about cooking, we need to be talking about a variety of cooking. There's a lot of great technology out there, and we want people to start using the technology, but not everybody can afford to retrofit their electric ranges with temperature limiting. And so professionally, we need to be better at going, who's not being served by this message? Who haven't we reached with it? Who do we need to make sure we're paying attention to?
Thank you so much for all your insight. October 8th through the 14th, Fire Prevention Week. Before we let you go, though, we want you to summarize as briefly, elevator pitch, why firefighters need to listen to this podcast and what you want them to take away. You ready?
Okay, firefighters need to listen to this podcast because we have a lot that we can offer you. And I think that that's the other piece is come to the website. It's there. It's free. It's there for you to take and use. And it's been developed by, our team who get the input from experts from all over, right? It's a blend of fire science and behavioral science and, public health tradition and community risk reduction. And, we have a variety of ways in which you can do these things, and you owe it to yourselves and your community to take part in these and listen to these podcasts and read the articles and take trainings and take advantage of different opportunities to learn and network and grow your own self and your toolkit, because that is a better you, right? You're busy giving to your community. Put this into yourself, invest in yourself so that you can help your community. And doing things like podcasts like this is a great way of doing this. So you can listen and learn from each other.
I agree 100%. I mean, that's really what the podcast is about. And your great point on, look, it's not just about putting the fire out. It's being better at educating the community on how they can help prevent the, injuries, accidents, fires. Again, firepreventionweek.org for all the toolkits, handouts. Here at the podcast, you can send us a message at bettereveryshift@firerescue1.com. If you're listening to this podcast, you can actually go to our YouTube page and YouTube channel on firerescue1.com and watch us in action. You can take a look at Sparky. You can see Janelle. You can see myself and Andrea. Again, thank you so much for all the insight, Andrea. We'll look forward to, all of the different things that are going to be happening October 8th through the 14th for Fire Prevention Week. Take this information to heart. Most importantly, make sure that you learn something, do something, and share something to make you and those around you better every shift. Thanks for listening, everybody.